all be done by independent third party. And you don't think this matters? Well, just think about this. There has been a 50% increase in disability claims in Britain over the course of the last 5 years. We are over-diagnosing many of these things, and in doing so, throwing young British people onto a scrap heap marked victim and replacing what they could be doing by cheap imported foreign labour. It is madness, and I would further point to the Boris wave. Indefinite leave to remain that begins to kick in very, very shortly for 1 million or more people who are in this country who will be able to claim benefits for the whole of their lives and to bring in dependents as well. There are some think tanks that estimate this particular cohort could cost up to £200 billion over the course of their lifetime. So in terms of benefit cuts, I think we've just proposed the biggest benefit cuts you've probably ever heard any government do, and I will make this absolute promise. We will substantially cut the benefits bill. We will reduce the size of the public sector. We will look, as we've already started, at public sector pensions, which are a massive liability, and from the early work that Richard has done, we can see these funds are paying fees that are way out of line for what should be appropriate and being badly mismanaged. On the cost of living, we will cut people's energy bills. Now, Keir Starmer said he'd cut them by £300. They're up £285. And if Mr Miliband's wind plan comes in, we'll have locked in higher energy for decades to come. We reckon sensibly we could cut £165 per annum off everybody's electricity bill. But it's in the area of population explosion, it's in the area of mass migration where perhaps we can help a lot. A move towards net zero population increase through migration would ease pressure on rents. It would ease pressure on house price affordability. And we will commit to the biggest building programme of genuinely affordable housing in this country that has ever been seen. Our young people deserve nothing less. So look, we will cut spending. We will encourage growth and entrepreneurship. We want to cut taxes, of course we do. But we understand substantial tax cuts, given the dire state of debt and our finances, are not realistic at this current moment in time. There are some relatively modest things we would do. We would immediately remove IHT from family farms and from family-run businesses. And we will raise the thresholds at which people start to pay tax to begin the process of getting people out of the 16-hour-a-week working debt trap that so many people find themselves in. The state of the finances, the state of the economy is far, far worse than it was in the run-up to a 2024 general election. But be in no doubt, we are pro-business. Be in no doubt, we want work to be rewarded. Be in no doubt, we will do everything we can to bring back confidence and to bring back a change of culture around work, money and success in this country. And be in no doubt that we will have higher quality people in charge of areas over which they've got knowledge than we've seen in this country for many, many decades. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to take a few questions. The first one is Harry Farley from the BBC.
Thank you, Mr Farage. Harry Farley from the BBC. A matter of months ago, you were talking about tax cuts worth billions of pounds. Now you say tax cuts at the moment are not realistic. How can people trust you when, just like the other political parties you criticise, you promise something before an election and then reverse it when it looks like it's difficult?
I didn't say we couldn't afford tax cuts, I said we couldn't afford huge tax cuts. And I mentioned a couple of tax cuts right at the end that I think are vital to be put in place very, very early. You talk about responsible. Well, look, we haven't wrecked the economy. You know, we're not the ones with projected government borrowing nearly double what it was before the last general election, with unemployment at a 4-year high, with inflation pushing 4%, and with, frankly, yet another tax-raising budget around the corner that'll further dampen growth. So I would say this to you: we are being mature, we are being sensible, and we are not over-promising. But for us not to take account of the dire state of our public finances, that I think would be irresponsible. Do we want to have a smaller state? Yes. Are we going to cut the benefits bill? Yes. Will the civil service be smaller? Yes. Will we get a grip on public sector pensions? Yes. But we can't have massive tax cuts until the markets can see we've at least got these things in hand. Next is Joel Hills from ITV News.
Hello there, Joel Hills from ITV News. You share Richard Tice's concerns about the affordability of public sector pensions. Is your message to teachers, to police officers, to NHS staff, that if they vote reform at the next election, you will cut their pensions?
No, what I said was what we discovered so far through local government, and by the way, you'll be hearing much more about the massive savings we've made through local government out through this country as we come up to the 6-month anniversary of being in charge of 10 of those counties. What we discovered, and this is through, a fairly brief look at the way that the pension funds are run at a county level, is they are paying exorbitant, and I mean exorbitant, fees to the pensions industry, which of course cumulatively over a 25 or 30-year period adds up to a very large chunk of the money, and we believe they're very badly administered. Our ambition is to make sure they save money and deliver better value. And you're going to hear more about this because Richard Tice will be giving a major speech at Bloomberg later this week, which will address this and many other issues. Thank you. Sam Coates, Sky News.
Thank you, Mr. Farage. You are the master of political reinvention. I mean, we've had Brexit Nigel and trade union Nigel and small state Nigel and nationalisation Nigel. And they line up like Barbies on a toy shelf. Today we've got fiscal responsibility Nigel. Why should we trust that this Nigel Farage survives to and beyond the next general election, when stuff gets jettisoned, when priorities change and political winds change?
I haven't jettisoned anything. I believe in pretty much the same sort of things I believed in 30 years ago. The difference to that is I now understand more than I did the role of the state in strategic industries. It's why Richard and I went to Scunthorpe, but if we hadn't gone to Scunthorpe, there would be no primary steel being made in Britain today. Have I adapted over 30 years into believing that the country needs an industrial strategy? Yes. Do I believe that actually, in certain failing industries, a short-term partial nationalisation where, by the way, the bondholders and shareholders get wiped out, it doesn't cost government to do it? Yes. So I think you'll find the shifts and changes that you're looking for quite difficult to find. I believe we have to be a competitive economy. I believe we have to have a hard work culture in this country. And I believe that unless business succeeds, the rest of the country can't succeed. A growing public sector does not make us richer. I think I've believed in that for almost 50 years, actually. Christopher Hope, GB News.
Nigel Farage, just on 2 points you raised there in your speech. You said you would raise thresholds, that's presumably income tax thresholds. In May, late May this year, you said you'd increase the basic rate threshold from £12,500 to £20,000. Does that still stand? That is the biggest commitment you've made on that area. And secondly, you haven't mentioned the pensions triple lock. You want to cut spending. Surely that is now under threat.
Okay, on thresholds, bear in mind that from 1988 until the end of Tony Blair's time in office, 1.5 million people paid 40p or more. 1.5 million people paid top-rate tax. By the end of next year, 8 million people will be paying 40p or more. Just to give you an illustration of the extent to which the state has grown, the extent to which we're managing our economy terribly, the extent to which we've not allowed businesses to go out and thrive and succeed, so dragging everybody in. We will raise thresholds. I cannot tell you what the state of the economy will be as the next general election approaches. If I'm right, and that election comes in 2027, then the economy will be in an even worse state than any of us in this room can even predict. So how can anybody project on pensions or thresholds or any of those things between now and then? What we will do, and what we can do, is to use whatever muscle we've got to fight and urge this government to change direction, to ease the burden on small business, being just one example. And you know, there are many things that we've said and done over the course of the last year that have led to government and opposition following what we say. So maybe we can change things slightly by debate, by force of reason, by opinion poll strength, although I suspect that with this Chancellor and with this Prime Minister, they're so torn between their old Labour voters going reform and their left-wing voters going for a Polanski, your party, whatever it may be, alliance, that I expect what we'll see more of is a government with no vision that just floats around but then U-turns when it gets the chance. Okay, I'm going to go to Sam Merriman from the Mail.
Hi. Is the minimum wage too high? Would reform lower it or scrap it to boost aspiration?
Sorry, say that again.
Is the minimum wage too high? Would reform lower it or scrap it to boost aspiration?
There's an argument the minimum wage is too high for younger workers, particularly given that we've lowered the level at which NIC is paid to $5,000 a year. So do one or the other. Do one or the other. Either lift the cap at which NI is due, or lower the minimum wage for lower workers. But you know what? I'd say this to the Chancellor: do something. Do something. Because for so many young people, that first job, and it can be in a pub or wherever it may be, it's a very, very important part of growing up, becoming part of a working, contributing adult. So I would urge the Chancellor to do one of those two things. Aubrey Allegressi from The Times.
Thank you. Aubrey Allegressi from The Times. I wanted to ask you about your nationalisation policy, which you set out earlier this year. You committed again in July to nationalising half the water industry, and you've talked since about nationalising the steel industry as well. How much would both of those things cost? Can you afford them if you're standing here and telling us about how you're going to be fiscally constrained? And are you signalling to workers that nationalisation is sometimes in the best interests of the taxpayer?
Nationalisation should only be used as an emergency measure. Of that I have no doubt at all. In the case of steel, if something hadn't happened, literally within a couple of days, this country would not be a primary producer of steel. The only major Western country that would not be a primary producer of steel. Now, I have heard in the last week that the government are going to begin to do some energy deals with one or two of the biggest users. But that, of course, is simply attacking the symptom of the problem and not the cause. It's the energy prices that heavy industry can't stand. Water's a different case. That's Thames Water, who have lost all credibility morally and financially. And our plan was, as I say, it wouldn't cost us anything. We'd wipe out the shareholders and look for new partners. Okay, Ryan Saby from The Sun.
Thank you. You talk about being pro-business and also pro-worker. Where do you stand on employment rights legislation? Would you scrap it? Would you water it down, especially when business says that the government estimates say it will cost £5 billion?
I said earlier on that government only listens to big business. And can very big business absorb the cost, the increased burden of the Employment Rights Act? Yes. Damages their small and medium-sized competitors. And that's the point. The more you regulate, yes, it'll cost big businesses, but if it bankrupts their competitors, that's great, as far as they're concerned. But not as far as the economy is concerned, not as far as choice is concerned, not as far as innovation is concerned. So look, the idea that the employment rights legislation should apply to a company with 3 employees, you have to start asking yourself a question. Who's that good for? Well, it's not good for the company, and it's certainly not good for the worker. And it's why I repeat what I said earlier. This is the most ignored part of the British economy. Those little firms that I'm talking about provide 60% of the jobs in the private sector. It's about time they had a voice in the public domain, and the employment rights legislation will damage them and their employees. And my final question, because I'm not doing hundreds today, I mean, normally I do 25 or whatever, and we have got more press conferences coming, but to show you the sheer levels of balance that we apply here, let's go to Pippa from The Guardian.
Thanks, Mr. Farage. I'll ask the other 25 questions for them, if you like. Can I ask who in mind you have to be Chancellor? Will it be Richard Tice, Zia Youssef, or somebody else entirely? Can I quickly also ask, do you still support PR? You're a big advocate of it for many years, but have seemed to have gone rather quiet on it now. The first past the post looks like it favours you. And to end the questions where we started, are you just doing what you accuse the other parties of, breaking promises in order to join the political mainstream? I'm really interested in that balance that you have to strike between retaining the benefits of insurgency while trying to make yourself look credible on the economy. Thank you.
Well, look, I mean, aspiration, you know, all I ever said was that raising the tax, I mean, I want the tax threshold to go to £20,000. I think it's vital for this country we get it there. It's vital that with benefits and getting people back to work, we have incentives. I think that's really, really important. As well as toughening of the rules, it needs the carrot and stick approach. So they were only ever aspirations. And I think what you're seeing today is us being realistic about the state of the economy. But when it comes to who's the Chancellor going to be, who's the Home Secretary going to be, and all the rest of it, this is a work in progress. You know, over the course of the summer, Danny Kruger joined us. He's taken on a very specific area for us. Colin Sutton joined us, most famous living cop in Britain. He's taken on a very specific area for us. Vanessa Frake joined us, you know, the toughest living prison governor in the country. She's taken on a very special purpose area for us. And there'll be more announcements in the next couple of weeks of people with expertise. No speculation about defections here. There'll be more expertise coming over the course of the next few weeks. And what I've tried to do really hard this year is to get away from this idea, this criticism, that somehow it's a one-man band. It's not a one-man band. There's a broadening team. They're sitting there in front of you, on the front row, from David Bull to Lee Anderson to Richard Tice to Danny Kruger, and indeed Zia Youssef as well. And there are others, and there'll be more. And as time goes on, there'll be more and more. And as we develop and build that team, we'll start to give people labels. Right now, we're not ready. But I would hope to think that with all the press conferences that we've done, the speeches we've done over the course of the last few months, that you can see that we are developing thinking, we're developing messaging in a very, very wide range of areas. The next big speech we're doing is it you, Richard? That's Bloomberg on the 5th. Bloomberg speech from Richard Tice on the 5th. Thank you very much.